So in the world of atoms, when we want to secure something, we construct a lock and a key at the same time, such that the pattern engraving on the key is unique and is the only pattern that can open that lock. So if you were to take a random sample of, say, 1,000 physical keys from individuals that you meet on the street, none of those keys would be able to unlock that lock, because it needs to have a very specific pattern on the key to be able to open that lock. Okay? So that's in the world of atoms. In the world of bits, we don't construct the lock and the key at the same time, but we have a process to go from the key to work out what the lock is from the key. So in, say, a Bitcoin case, the private key is just a very, very large random number, very, very long random number, which is impossible to guess. And then we calculate the public key from this private key. It's a one-way function, so it's impossible, if you have knowledge of the public key, to reverse it and calculate what the private key is from that public key. If you could, then this private key, public key system wouldn't work in any way. Okay, so private key to public key, impossible to reverse if you have knowledge of the public key and calculate what the private key is. The public key is calculated by multiplying the private key, it's a very long random number, by a generator point. I won't go into the elliptic curve math, but the generator point for this elliptic curve that Bitcoin uses is just a coordinate, an x, y, of which x and y are also very large, but they're fixed, right? And it's part of the definition of this elliptic curve that Bitcoin uses. So all you need to know about the generator point is just it's a coordinate, an x, y, where x and y are very large and fixed. So you multiply that generator point by the private key, the very long random number, and that's how you get your public key. So your public key is a coordinate. It's a very large random number multiplied by this fixed coordinate. Now, Bitcoin also has this concept of addresses. When you spend from address, you reveal the public key, or multiple public keys that were encoded within that address. And pre-Taproot, the process for calculating the address from the public key was you'd go through these hash functions. You'd go through a SHA-256 and a RIPE-MD-160, and you go through these hash functions, and that would spit out the address associated for that public key, assuming there's just a single signature is required to spend from that address. So that's pre-Taproot. And because the hash functions are also one way, right? So if you know the address, you can't go back to the public key. In a similar way that if you have knowledge of the public key, you can't go back to the private key. You can calculate the public key from the private key, but you can't calculate the private key from the public key. Similarly, if you have knowledge of the address, you can't calculate the public key from that address. You have to wait for the public key to be revealed when money is spent from that address. Now that was pre-Taproot. Post-Taproot, for Taproot addresses, you have a bare public key, and it's most of the time it's encouraged to tweak this bare public key with a hash. The hash is the Merkle root of the Taproot tree. I've discussed Taproot in another video, so I won't repeat the explanation for that, but it's the address can be just a bare public key, or it can be a tweaked public key, and that's what goes into the address. Similarly, as before with pre-Taproot, if you have knowledge of the address, you can't calculate what the public key was if it's been tweaked, but obviously if it's a bare public key going in the address, then it's then anyone with the address can see what the bare public key is. So that's private keys, public keys, and addresses. The reason it works is that it's a one-way function from the private key to the public key, and then from the public key to the address in the pre-taproot case, it's also a one-way function. And as long as the public key is tweaked in the taproot case, it's also impossible to work out what the bare public key is if it's been tweaked until it's revealed on chain.